a meeting of the confirmation for the Chief Executive Officer following the announcement of Mr. Birch's retirement. So I'll move to the agenda first. Apologies for absence.
Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor Beale, Councillor Trotter, Councillor Dilks and David.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any declarations of interest from members this afternoon? No, I don't see any. Okay, I'll now point out the business this afternoon. I'll ask you shortly, Commissioner, to introduce your preferred candidate and give some details around that. And following that, Joanne, we will be asking you a number of questions. Following those questions, we will go into private session and make a decision, a recommendation anyway. And then I think the guidance is that we write to you within one working day. Well, we will write to you this afternoon. Thank you. Okay. Joanne, have you got any questions you'd like to ask? Okay, thank you. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So this is the first time Lincolnshire has held a confirmation hearing for a chief executive, as Mr. Birch predated the police and crime panel and PCC arrangements. So it's a historic meeting from that perspective. And firstly, I would just like to pay tribute to Malcolm and what he's delivered. He, not just here in Lincolnshire, but he has given a lifetime of service in various public roles, both voluntarily and in paid positions. And he absolutely has been stalwart in making sure that the two police and crime commissioners we've had in Lincolnshire have been supported to the very best of his ability. And that relationship has always been a positive and productive one. And I think what's really important is making sure that the roles of PCC and Chief Executive are very distinct, and that has definitely been the case. And I know that Jo has a similar mind of independence to make sure that she would tell me honestly her views and make sure that I was getting the best possible advice, regardless of whether it's advice that I would wish to hear. And I think that's really important, having somebody that's able to not just deliver upon your aims and ambitions as the elected representative, whether that's as a council leader with their chief exec or whether it's a PCC, but absolutely to make sure that you are upholding the best possible delivery for the public in the correct way. And that is certainly something I've enjoyed with Malcolm, and I would thank him for that and wish him all the very, very best for his future endeavours. But certainly what I was very aware of is that we're in times of change. Lincolnshire's in times of change, the country's in times of change. We've got local government reform looming large on the horizon. We do not know yet what that's going to mean for Lincolnshire. We equally do not know what the police productivity review is going to deliver. It doesn't look like it's going to deliver police mergers. It's certainly the previous Home Secretary's view was that it would not. I don't know what the current Home Secretary's view is. So it felt that going out to do a full recruitment process at this point was the inappropriate thing to do, given there was so much uncertainty in the landscape, that it made sense to utilise the very substantial skill set that Jo has in this role in a temporary way, to allow us time to understand what the landscape for Lincolnshire looks like, so we can make an appropriate decision when we do go to a substantive recruitment position, because we do not want anything other than to exercise value for money for the taxpayer. At the same time, we want the least amount of disruption within the organisation to enable us to continue to deliver the programme that we're delivering, not least of which all the things we mentioned this morning about the financial challenges within the force. All of those things, Jo is already substantially across when it comes to the work that she already does. So from my point of view, it's a key role, not just to support me, but to challenge me and make sure that as Commissioner, you're doing the right things in the right way. And that is really valuable to me. But also to have somebody there who is able to support the very small yet very hard-working team that are the OPCC, and equally to work in a very trusted way with the huge range of partners we have across criminal justice, local government, health, and a whole range of others, both locally, regionally, I say both, locally, regionally, and nationally. And, you know, I've got every confidence that Joe not only already does that, but will continue to do that in a much more enhanced way as the chief executive. So that's why I've chosen the course of action I've chosen. I believe it represents the best value for money. It buys us the time we need to understand the landscape, and it means that we can continue to deliver the work in a seamless way from today onwards.
Thank you, Commissioner. You've actually answered the first question around the recruitment process, why you didn't go out to a process. So over to Councillor Matthews. You've got a question. Thank you.
Kind of answered that question as well, but I would like just finding myself in a very similar situation to you recently, in that I need to now go out and find a new chief executive. I'm interested for you to explain a little bit more why you think now particularly is a more flux time than in 3 years' time, when actually things really could be in flux. So now seems to be, looking at the next 5 years, for example, now seems to be a more stable time certainly for the police than it is likely to be in 4 or 5 years' time. So I've taken the opposite view, and I've gone to go out and advertise outside rather than employ an interim. And I'd just like you to explain to me a little bit more as to the thought process that you've come to say now's the right time to have an interim rather than go for a full.
Yeah, I think you've got to bear in mind we're at the position where in a few weeks we could literally be making decisions to start dismantling the organisation. That's one of the options, that we reduce service dramatically. And if we're in that position, there's questions over the viability of Lincolnshire Police. Without having that certainty and clarity, which we will undoubtedly have in the coming months, then I will know where I am. But to go and recruit a chief executive in the maelstrom of genuinely going, will we be expected to reduce the entire service by 20%? Then that is a real crunch point for us right now. So having that clarity, that certainty of what will happen around that is really important. And that isn't 3 or 4 years away. That's literally weeks and months away.
So you don't see this as a particularly long-term interim?
Well,
6 months.
It's a 12-month scenario that I'm looking at, and there's a number of reasons for that. I think firstly, we need to be in a position with government where we understand what next year's budget looks like, and then we will see where that sort of plays. So the other thing I need is stability internally. So what I will need to do is some backfilling for some of the duties that Joe undertakes at the moment. And again, it's very hard to find temporary skill sets the shorter the period of time you're looking for. So to be able to provide those opportunities in an appropriate length of time, then it needs to really be a 12-month situation that I'm looking at. I do believe that makes lots of sense, because the other thing as well, if I went externally right now, if I was looking for a chief exec position, I might question why I would apply to an organisation that had got such a cliff edge situation of their finances. So what we want to make sure that we do when we do go to a full recruitment process is be as stable as possible to be able to offer you can never say a guarantee, but a very clear strategic direction to enable somebody to understand whether their skill set would best fit the scenario that we were presenting. And hopefully that will present then with having some strong interest in the role. I think it would be a much weaker field if we're trying to do that now. And that is that's not me undermining the skill set that Joanne brings, because genuinely, I'm sure she would apply and equip herself really, really well if I did go to an external situation. But right now, what I need is stability and the ability to continue the work that we're doing with the force in the way. And one of the key elements that a chief executive undertakes in our scenario is to have a direct one-on-one relationship with the deputy chief constable. So while I meet with the chief constable, the chief executive meets with the deputy chief constable. And if you like, it's that officer to officer input that deals with a lot of the day-to-day sort of grit that gets stuck in the machinery. And that is hugely important at such a very difficult time with all the change programme we've got going on, both with the work with HMI, but also just the general transformation programme we've got going on in Lincolnshire. So throwing somebody completely new into all of that right now would not be helpful to either organisation, let alone for that individual. So I think the timing of it lends itself very well to continuity and stability, where I think a year from now, we'll be in a very different place of understanding where we are and where the force are strategically.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. What assessments have you undertaken of Ms Davison's skills, knowledge and experience?
Well, there's a number of things really. I mean, for a start, I am not the chief of staff. That would be the chief executive. So in this case, the recruitment to bring Jo into the organisation, and then the, if you like, the ongoing management of her work on a daily basis is carried out by the chief executive. So I meet with the chief executive and we discuss how everything's going. We know one of the key aspects of Jo's jobs is the delivery of the police and crime plan, and the reports therefore that you receive broadly are the sum of her work in delivering that through the organisation. So a lot of the assessment is done from an output point of view. Am I happy that my police and crime plan is being delivered both in its previous form, but then the fact that it was in consultation, obviously a lot of the way it was constructed and put together, again, done by Jo, and then the delivery on an ongoing basis is led by Jo. So I suppose the role is very closely aligned to the objectives I set and want to be delivered. It's often that the role Jo carries out is of delivery. So that assessment is done on an ongoing daily basis. And I am very clear that I've been very happy with the progression through that, the way that the teams are delivering against the objectives that Jo sets. She oversees and sets the direction and control around things like commissioning. That's in a very good, positive, healthy position. So things like the commissioning of things like the SARC and other things, everything has been aligned in a much more I don't know what the right word is really, but in a sensible sort of way to try and line things up in a logical way so that we can commission either jointly with others or we're commissioning in a way that makes the most value and efficiency. So I've got a high level of confidence that the skill set Jo has shown already can only be built upon by taking on the additional responsibilities of chief executive.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Pessell.
Thank you, Chairman. How do you intend to evaluate the effectiveness of the role of the chief executive?
Well, we obviously meet and have regular dialogue regarding delivery. But in addition to that, we have sort of that annual touch point of making sure that we've agreed what we want to see delivered through the year. And then we obviously discuss how that delivery is then happening throughout the year and ultimately at the end of the year. So with such a close relationship in such a small organisation, it becomes immediately apparent if things aren't heading in the right direction, and you can rectify those or they come to a head very quickly. And as we've seen with other chief executives previously at LCC before the current leader's time, if that relationship doesn't work out, it becomes apparent very quickly that there's an issue and it can be dealt with. I think that's one of the advantages I've got. If you like, I've had a try before I buy situation up to now. I know the personality that I'm getting with Jo. I know the skill set I'm getting. And actually, by doing the temporary role, it also provides me the opportunity to actually see somebody operating in that role as well. So by the time we are in a position to go fully to the open market for it, there will have been obviously that 12-month period to be able to see exactly what's being offered. So in some respect, it's a much stronger position than just going straight out to market. You get somebody, and if it doesn't work out, you've got to deal with it. You've got that period of time to actually see how it works. But that will be sort of assessed as I go on throughout the year.
Just following on from that question, do you appraise the chief executive annually?
We have done that in different ways. So we haven't hit on a particular route that is definitive on how to do it. What we have done is set out a number of objectives, which obviously then we could sort of work against. So we do that kind of assessment where we're very clear about what we want to deliver and then have those things been delivered. But I equally think it's really important that you can have ongoing discussions in real time as you go out throughout the year, because as I say, in a large organisation, it's very different, but actually we're working quite closely on a very regular basis to deliver in quite a operational way, not just at a strategic level. So though that relationship is different in some respects to a larger organisation, but so yes, there is an assessment, but it's not like a formal PDR process.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Joanne, we'll now move on to some questions for you. But thank you, Commissioner, for that. I'll ask the first question. How familiar are you with the statutory responsibilities of the chief executive in a policing context?
So the role of the chief exec is fundamental to support the PCC to deliver their statutory duties and to ensure good governance. In terms of the delivery of those statutory duties, we're looking at things like producing the police and crime plan and delivering against it, which I've been responsible for whilst I've been working for the PCC. Engagement and consultation with the public. As you're aware, we do an annual consultation through the office, which I lead on for each year. And that annual survey has seen a 40% increase since I commenced, from the number of respondents and actually the diversity of respondents as well. In terms of the good governance, it's about making sure that the decisions that are taken are lawful, ethical, and so there's a significant role for the chief exec in making sure that that happens and there's good decision-making processes in place to support that. So we do have those processes in place already, where decisions would be seen by CFO and myself before being put before the PCC. That monitoring officer role within the chief exec role is around those legal and ethical decisions. And then there's also the head of paid service role, which is about overseeing and developing the people within the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question, Councillor Matthews, thank you.
I'm going to do a double header again.
Okay,
right. Joanne, good to meet you. I worry for you. I genuinely do. Do you not have any concerns going from a very safe full-time job into an interim position when your commissioner has just said to us that in a few weeks' time you may be all be getting made redundant, and the first thing that will happen is an interim chief executive will be gone?
Just want to add some clarity. That wasn't what I said. I'm not going to make everybody redundant in a few weeks. I definitely did not say that.
You understand what I mean? You're going from a very secure job to an interim position, and there must be huge personal risks to you in that regard.
Firstly, I would say under employment law there isn't, because it's an interim position, so my position has to remain in the structure, and as head of paid service, I wouldn't be making my position redundant. That will remain. We will seek to see how we backfill that. So it isn't actually a risk in those terms. In terms of financial position of the force, I think the PCC has already referenced, I've been intrinsically involved with all of those discussions with the Home Office, the long rehearsed narrative around the finances of Lincolnshire Police. And I think we're in a relatively good position that we'll be able to get a solution that means that the force won't have to issue a Section 114, which would be absolutely catastrophic and be the first force to have to do so. I'm hoping the government won't allow that to happen. If it did happen, then worst case scenario, we have a team to think about. And I've worked with this team for 7 years. And it would be my role to steer them through that if that was the absolute worst case scenario. But as I say, I would hope that wouldn't happen.
Okay, and my actual question then is, how do you define good leadership in public service?
So I work on the basis of being open, honest and transparent. And in terms of leadership, for me, it's around setting a clear direction and expectation. One of the things I did when I came in and I was responsible for delivery of the police and crime plan was trying to draw that golden thread through from delivery of the plan. Statutorily, that's what we're all there to deliver against. How does that align to an individual's role? So what does that mean if I am working in victim links and supporting victims? What is driving me and how does that fit as part of the broader team? So we have organisational development days now where we bring together the entire team and look at what is our core purpose and what are we trying to deliver. In this role, and probably seen from my CV, I'm kind of public sector through and through. So for me, it's about making sure that it's public first. People understand that it is our role to support the office of the PCC, and we need to be independent and fair in that. So one of the elements, and I didn't mention it under the statutory function, is about being completely politically independent. So we support the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, not the individual. So in terms of leadership, I'd say setting clear direction, making sure people understand how their role links to the aims of the organisation, so we're all pulling in the same direction.
Thank you very much. Councillor Croy. Oh, my apologies. Sure.
Okay. Hi, Joanne. Just a question for you. Other than funding, what do you see as the key challenges facing policing and community safety in our area? And how will you support the PCC in addressing that?
I know you said other than funding, I will just touch on that because I know we've covered heavily this morning the police funding. It's another element to that. So when I first started with the organisation, I was directly responsible for commissioning of victim services. There's also an issue of short-term funding across the police. So there's not just the sustainability piece around Lincolnshire Police. We have significant issues where we are given one-off pieces of funding for short periods. So the hotspot funding ends at the end of March. The serious violence funding ends at the end of March. And it's how we make sure that we build in continuity of service so that we don't have a cliff edge in delivery and we make things sustainable is one of my concerns. We have some of that around some of our victims funding as well. Where during COVID, we were given additional allocations. A lot of that ceases in March. So it's about making sure that we can keep the standard and keep the delivery, but find a different way of doing it. I think the second priority is probably the fact that the force remain engaged and supporting them through that. So the PCC already referenced that he supports by attending the PPOG meetings. Internally, the force have a piece of work called Op Pledge, which is their programme of work that delivers against them being engaged. I attend those meetings and an active contributor to that. So whilst the PCC holds the chief to account through some of his governance structures, we are actively in those meetings as well so that we can hear the solutions that are being offered and be kind of close to it. So absolutely getting the force out engaged needs to be a priority, supporting with that. I think my third one would be a bit of a double hander, and it's trust and confidence of the public in the context of the first two, because we've understandably had to be very public about the fact that the force is facing this funding cliff edge, whilst at the same time saying the police do a fabulous job and they are doing the best they can do with the resources that we have, and it would be great to do more. But obviously trust and confidence from the public is fundamental to having a good police force. And then at the same time, that internal view that was mentioned this morning about how you retain your staff and retain the trust and confidence of the staff in the force. Everybody joins because they want to do a good job, whether that's as a police officer or as a staff member. How we keep that morale up, because people do a fabulous job day after day. I think most of the people in the police are, like me, public servants who want to do a good job. The risk we've got is because of the funding challenges and because of the challenge around the trust and confidence, get people who are leaving. And that's as true of potentially of the PCC's office as it is of the force.
Thank you. Councillor Croy. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So thank you to Joanne and Mark for your answers so far. I may have a supplementary depending on how you answer my question. So can you describe for us your approach to stakeholder engagement, particularly with regard to local authorities, voluntary organisations and the public? So when I first started with the PCC's office, my job title was Partnership and Delivery Manager. So I've been looking at, I went to a lot of the meetings that allowed me to identify the key stakeholders in terms of the statutory partners. And I also have a background in health and social care. So my job prior to this one was actually working with the local community health trust. So in terms of statutory partners, I think health are a key partner. And they've also done significant work around right care, right person, about making sure that the right person responds to mental health incidents, for example. So we liaise closely with the Integrated Care Board, and we actually have practitioners in the force control room, mental health practitioners, who we co-commission with the ICB. There's those health partners, such as EMAS and the Community Health Trust and the Acute Trust, who it's important to re-engage with to understand their plans. We do a lot of work with the Mental Health Trust because of the impacts and implications for policing. In terms of other statutory partners, obviously we've got fire, who are a potential key partner. The local authorities we work closely with predominantly through the community safety partnerships. So I'm a member of the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership Strategic Board, as well as sitting on the Boston South Holland East Lindsey Community Safety Partnership. And we're active members within those groups. In terms of district councils themselves, we have good connections, and I have built relationships with each of the kind of community safety managers, so that where there's opportunities for us to work together, particularly around funding. So when there's been things like Safer Streets, we've been able to work very quickly with them to turn around proposals and put in bids. And more broadly than that, looking outside of the statutory functions, I think the voluntary community sector are absolutely crucial for us to engage with. There are cohorts within communities who don't have the greatest trust and confidence in policing, and the voluntary community sector can be fabulous at allowing us to work more closely with those communities and develop those networks, particularly where we have groups as well who may have different communication needs. We will liaise with their support agencies and faith groups to have those conversations where you've got trusted leaders. They can then make those connections for us. I think with stakeholder mapping, don't know what you don't know. So the more connections you can make to individuals who have other networks for you, I think is absolutely critical. Thank you. And I know that there's a similar question coming up, so I just wanted to draw your mind to be very specific to your outward facing role. In your CV, in your current role, you represent the PCC in regional national meetings across the stakeholder networks. And we know that the Deputy Police and Crime Commission also, by definition, deputises. So in your outward facing role, how do you ensure that separation between your executive role and representing the PCC's outward facing? So the Deputy PCC is a political role. My role is an officer role, so there is that clear distinction. The Deputy support on political matters, where I am always there with an independent perspective as an officer. So even where we may be in the same meeting, we would have a slightly different representation. But I'm looking at the delivery of the statutory functions and making sure that everything we do is legal and ethical, as opposed to supporting the PCC from a political perspective. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The PCC have already described that you work closely together with Chief Executive. So in the role of Chief Executive, you work closely with the PCC. But how do you demonstrate your independence when acting as a monitoring officer, particularly where your professional advice may differ from the view of the PCC?
Question. So my view might differ from the PCC. Is different to whether I perceive that the PCC is doing something that is unlawful or unethical. So the PCC sets the police and crime plan. My duty is to support delivery against that. But If we had a difference of opinion, we have a good working relationship. If it was just a difference of opinion on something, we would discuss it the way that we do now. I would present alternatives, my perspective, but ultimately, if it was legal and ethical, then the PCC is perfectly within his rights to continue with that course of action. There have been occasions where we've had different views. Sometimes Mark has retained his view, sometimes he's changed it based on the advice that I've given him. What is clear is under the monitoring officer role, that I would have a clear duty under the local government and housing responsibilities of the monitoring officer role, that if the PCC was to do something that was unlawful or constitute maladministration, whether that's by action or omission, then it's clear within that act what I would have to do in terms of escalation through to the panel in conjunction with the CFO. I think what's really important is that whoever is in this post as CEO has a duty to the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner and not to any individual.
Thank you. My next question is, we have a monitoring officer panel. What relationship do you think you would have if you were appointed chief executive with our monitoring?
And that's really important. The policing protocol was updated in 2023 because there was some confusion or lack of clarity between PCC, panel and operational independence of chiefs. And actually panels are really important in terms of the public scrutiny and the governance around the role of the PCC. What will be my duty is to try and make sure that we have a really good working relationship panel, that we provide timely information that allows you to carry out your statutory functions. So what I would want to do is work closely with the monitoring officer to make sure that worked smoothly for all concerned being.
Thank you. Councillor Sheard.
So what steps will you take to maintain transparency and accountability in your role, especially when dealing with politically sensitive issues?
So in terms of transparency, there are regulations in terms of the specified information or about some of the information through the office that we're required to publish. So that's information on decisions, on performance, on complaints and other matters. But really what I would say is I think I've always worked in an open and transparent way. The partners who I've worked with up to now would reflect that. Where I can share information, I do. And I think basically that I would continue in that vein.
Thank you. Our final question, Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, thank you. How do you manage the tension between political priorities and statutory obligations in your role as monitor officer?
Can you give me an example, Councillor Marsh?
You wanted the political part, which is the PCC, you wanted to take a certain course of action or to follow, and you as the monitor officer would say, well, your statutory obligations don't cover that. You must do this or the other. How would you manage doing something that you felt was not a statutory obligation, but was a clear political wish?
So as chief executive, you have to remain apolitical. It's not about being partisan to support one party or another. If there was something that the PCC wanted to do that was unlawful, constituted maladministration, I would have to ask. If the PCC was choosing to do something because it was in his political manifesto, that's a different matter, and he is within his rights to put something from his manifesto into the police and crime plan, which then would be statutorily delivered by the office. I don't answer your question.
Okay, thank you. Before I move on, is there any member of the panel who'd like to ask any further questions? No, don't see any. Okay, so that concludes our questions. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Joanne, for your responses. We will shortly go into private session and debate, and we will write to you this afternoon, as I said earlier. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.